Welcome to This Week from Blue Mountain Broadcasting. I'm your host, Linnell Ellis, and I'm delighted you've tuned in for the show today. I'm going to be interviewing Helen Heavirland, who's an author and has written a fascinating book about our local region called Surviving the Sand, with a subtitle, My Family's Struggle to Farm the Pasco Desert. Can't wait for that interview. I'm already reading the book, and it's really good. And we have some station news to share with you at the end of the program, but right now, let's start with our devotional thought. You know, anxiety is one of the biggest issues of our time. How often we hear of those who are suffering from anxiety and depression. In fact, you might even be one of the people for whom anxiety is a particular issue. It's common. Why are we so anxious? Especially as Christians, why do we let anxiety overtake us so often? I really believe that God wants to set our minds at ease. He wants to give us peace. You remember what he said about anxiety and worrying? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. That's from Matthew chapter 6, verses 26 through 34. So God knows all about our troubles, our challenges and our frustrations, our worries. If God doesn't want us to be anxious and he promises to take care of us, then why are we so persistent in being worried and anxious? The other day, I read a couple of paragraphs from a devotional book by Amanda Jenkins and Kristen Kendricks that really helped me to answer some of these questions. First, if we don't want to be anxious, we need to focus on God's kingdom instead of our own problems. As the devotional said, when we focus on his priorities and not our own, anxiety fades, period. This is really good to remember. It is about focus and priorities, about putting our focus on God's kingdom and not about our own troubles. Second, it actually takes discipline to focus on God's kingdom instead of ourselves. Listen to this from that same devotional reading. The remedy for anxiety is simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It takes a disciplined mind to take worrisome thoughts captive and to make those thoughts obedient to the truth of who God is and what he promises to do. It takes spending time with him to know him more, to trust him more, and to grow in the kind of faith that overshadows fear. It takes time reading our Bible in order to know what it says, in order to believe what it says. Because only in God and his word will we find the peace and freedom from anxiety our overactive minds and hearts are longing for. So that's the key. It actually takes time. We can't just expect it to happen to us. We need to spend that time getting to know God, reading his word. After reading what I just shared with you, I took some personal spiritual inventory And I realized that as I'm getting older and I have more years of leaning on Jesus and trusting God with my life, I'm beginning to see how this really works. Practicing trusting God with my life really does work. And what I mean is that as I have been through my life, daily practicing giving my concerns over to Him rather than taking life on by myself, I'm beginning to see how God works, and He keeps working, and I can look back now on a track record of how He takes those troubles, how He turns things around, and realizing I indeed can trust Him with these things. It is a perpetual struggle to let go and let God have control. At least for my personality, it's a constant thing every single day. But the more I practice it, the less anxiety I have in my life. So we need to pour our hearts out to God about the things we fear and then trust Him to take care of us. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Joining me now is Helen Heavirland, author of a number of books, but one of the books that she has written recently, has been published recently, is called Surviving the Sand. And she's here today to talk with us about this book that is of significance to our region. So first of all, I've been reading the book. I'm just getting into it enough to not want to put it down, that's for sure. But Surviving the Sand, why did you write this particular book?
To me, there are several reasons. One is from a regional history standpoint. And the farmers that settled the Columbia Basin in the 1950s, are all pretty much gone and only a few left. And we have lost the whole history, unless somebody would write it down. We've lost the history of what it took to settle the Columbia Basin, which was a lot.
It did take a lot because it's desert. In fact, the subtitle of the book is My Family's Struggle to Farm the Pasco Desert. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we kind of take it for granted now, perhaps. We see a lot of things growing. When I go down to Andy's Market, I buy fruit that says locally grown, that is grown right in this region you're talking about.
Yes, and I still sometimes, if I stop to think about it, when I'm driving to the Tri-Cities or north from there to Ritzville or something, it shocks me again, all over again, when I see the miles and miles of cropland, vineyards, orchards. It was nothing at first but desert.
Yeah.
Miles and miles of desert.
Yes.
That blew once, the sand blew once you disturbed the desert. So
you wrote not just about the historical event of turning this desert into farmland, but you're writing this from a very personal perspective. Was that part of why you wrote it as well?
I'm sure probably part of it. I was a child when we moved in 1954. Some of the first farmers that settled. When we moved there, going north from Court Street and what is now 68, for 20 miles there was not another farm, there was not another house, there was nothing but desert for 20 miles, and then there was one building. And now, you have whole Road 68, you have a whole metropolis there, practically. But there was nothing. It was miles and miles of desert.
Yes. So an incredible story. And I was given a copy of this book, thank you, to look through. And I'm not sure what I was expecting at first. You know, it looked like it was going to have some historic significance. I wondered if knowing you and some of the other books you've written, if it might also be a spiritual story. And I didn't quite know what to expect. But getting into it, I'm already just so engaged with this story. And it's reminding me actually quite a bit of reading something written by Laura Ingalls Wilder, that style of how did this happen from a family's perspective, how it happened, and it's engaging in that same kind of way. Here's the things that happened. Here's the struggles people talked about. Here are the little things things that mean a lot to us actually in life. And you're really good at describing those details, at making it very relatable.
Good.
So it's really fun reading this. When we think, though, of settling the West, like I just mentioned, what was happening in the 1840s, right? When we think of settling the West, we think that happened in the 1800s, a long, long time ago. But it feels like this story is also about settling the West. How does that work?
I often refer to that time as pioneering 100 years late.
Yes.
It really was pioneering, like Laura Ingalls Wilder and hundreds and thousands of people did in the 1800s. But they didn't have the ability to make a cropland out of the desert at that point without irrigation.
Yes.
And so it was not until irrigation came in that it was even possible to make any kind of a living, which the first couple years was hardly a living at all. But to settle it and make farms out of it, it just wasn't possible until there was irrigation.
Yes, and I know in your book you're describing an irrigation canal that was nearby. There were reasons why you were able to even carve something out of the desert. But when we think about it, farming in general is difficult. It's very difficult to get started farming, even in ideal countryside, let alone in a desert. So there's been some interest in the content of this book that's wider than maybe, I know that like the other books, we'll talk about them in a little bit, but some of the other books you've written have been published by Christian publishers. They've been targeted at that audience specifically. This book, not published by one of those familiar Christian publishers. Who published this book?
This is published by Washington State University Press, specifically their new imprint, Basalt Books. And because of the regional history. But they also, though it is not a religious book per se, the values are there. For instance, as we, in our family, we had family worship morning and evening, blessings before meals. Yes,
sure.
And all of this is part of it. We went to private schools. We went to church.
Yes.
All of this is a part, and the church activities is all a part of the story, and was the part of many family stories at that time.
Yes.
But
For
I was really excited to be able to include that sort of thing.
Oh, definitely. And it wouldn't be the true story of your family's experience without those things.
Absolutely not. It was a very important part of our experience.
Yeah, I'm sure central to it in many ways.
Yes.
So having those things included in such a beautiful narrative form and also learning the history is really fun for the reader for sure. So it's, Washington State University thinks it's historically significant, which is, it's neat. And it is. So that's my way of kind of recommending to people that they should get this book. They should read it. It's important for our region. I think it's a great story that we can connect with. And also, for me, when I'm reading it, I think about some of the times in which my parents were growing up and what life was like during that era in general. So there's some connection that way as well. You're talking in your book about what was known as the arid West, that place that couldn't be farmed without irrigation. And you have here a map. I'm going to hold it up. Hopefully we can get an image of it. If not, maybe we can add one in editing. But the arid West here, it says by 1906, Congress had basically recognized and designated this part of the United States, which is over half of it,
Yes.
as kind of not farmable without irrigation, right?
The part that is divided here as states, all of that was considered arid West and not farmable without some kind of help. Numbers of people had tried to irrigate if they lived near a river.
Yes.
So there were settlements, there were
Along waterways.
But other than that, some people tried with water wheels and a variety of different things to irrigate further out. It just did not work until the federal government finally, and it was interesting how early it started. In 1862, when the Homestead Act was put into place,
Yes.
many people came west, but then many of them left because they could not make a living. They could not make a go of it.
And they couldn't make it rain. So.
Yeah, right. So as early 1902 was when the Reclamation Act was passed, and at that point they recognized the absolute significance. If the whole West was going to be farmed, there needed to be irrigation available.
It's really incredible. And when we look at the West today, and the success of the Western states, and many people who want to move to the West because it is arid, they don't have to deal with the humidity and some of those things that go along on the east side of the country. It's pretty incredible. Getting back to your family's experience with this, in the book, you're describing a lot of struggles that your family went through. Obviously, you survived them. That the name says "Surviving the Sand." You did survive. And what were those experiences like for you, and how have they impacted your life?
Well, when we first moved there, my father had built an 8-foot by 16-foot shack for a kitchen for our family of 6, and we slept in an old Army surplus tent. And that's not too bad at first in the summer, although totally different than what we had been used to. But then the wind, which would sometimes blow the seed away after you got it planted, and then after you replanted a few times, finally you'd get some plants up, and the wind would come and the sand would cut off the new plants. And then one night, I woke early one morning. I was a hard sleeper, and I woke up, and even before I opened my eyes, I knew something was different. It was too light. I opened my eyes, and there was the blue sky.
The top of the tent was gone.
The wind in the night, a gust of wind had come up and tore the tent to shreds.
Yeah.
And so that was the end of the tent. We moved our beds over beside the shack, and that's where we slept, was just out in the open. Fall came. We put the canopy from off of our pickup, we put over my brother's bed. He had the luxury suite. A roof and even walls. My sister's and my bed was on the other side of the shack. And my dad, we had some 2x10s, and he leaned those up against the shack. So we had a cover. If the rain came straight down, it would barely miss our bed.
Yes.
But there was nothing on the sides. Mom and Dad had nothing over theirs, but they made sure us kids had cover first.
Wow.
We spent our first winter sleeping outside.
Oh.
In those conditions.
I haven't gotten that far in the book yet. Wow. Unbelievable. We know what winter can be like here.
Yeah. I remember one day it being something like 17 degrees when we got up in the morning.
Yes.
And you learned to get dressed under the covers and run to the, around the corner into the shack and stand beside the oven door that was open because Mom already had the heat on.
Yes.
The heat was the oven door.
Yes.
The oven.
Incredible. This certainly must have impacted your life from here on out.
Absolutely. And I think tough times pass, but tough people last.
Yes.
And I think I've come to realize as in doing this book, I depended on my older brother and sister a lot as well. We had a lot of emails and phone calls back and forth. And realizing that all 4 of us have grown up to be tough but compassionate. And to me, I'm very grateful for that combination.
Yes.
I can't say I want to go back and relive my early days.
Yes.
But I'm really thankful for them. And they have made a difference in the way I relate to people. I had a very wise mother. A father who dreamed, which is why we were there in the first place.
Yes.
A mother who was very wise and willing to struggle for someone else's dream.
Yes.
And the wisdom that she passed down to us, whether it was as new people moved into the area, dealing with, the word just left me.
I'm sorry.
Dealing with when there's discrimination.
Yes.
The wisdom that she had, and those kinds of things are in the book, of how she just made dealing with relationships with people, dealing with life. She presented things in such a way that it was just easy to learn and easy to become people with values.
Yes, incredible. Well, those things that you're describing there are why I'm already enjoying this book, and I know others who, where can they get a copy of Surviving the Sand?
Well, they can get it locally at the ABC, and if it isn't at Book and Game yet, it will be there shortly.
Okay, so Book and Game, the ABC Christian Bookstore.
Right.
Okay.
They can get it on Amazon. They can order directly from Washington State University Press.
Okay, lots of good ways to get it.
Any store can order it.
And we have just a moment, but I wanted to also acknowledge that you've written several other really good books. Falling for a Lie, Zion, which is a story about a dog, right?
Yes.
And My Enemy, My Brother, which is an incredible World War II story. And then My God is Bigger. That's a personal journey story, yes?
That one is also a personal journey, and when I wrote my first one, it was like my husband and I were under attack for the full time. And My God is Bigger is the story of how God is bigger than any challenge. If we're in His plan, we can trust in Him.
Very good. Well, Helen, thanks for spending a few minutes with us today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, my privilege.
And thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Time for station news. First of all, thank you to those of you who have been contributing to our Save Our Servers Fund. I have good news. That fund is growing. We now have about $9,000 out of the $213,000 that we need, and we are able to take the first steps in using that first amount of money to begin moving some of the most critical equipment from our older place where we were housed to our newer facility at Wallula, which will and is now the home of Blue Mountain Broadcasting, where we're receiving visitors there at Wallula now, and all of our mail goes there, and most of our staff are working there, and we will soon be able to bring the rest of the staff over as well as this money comes in and as we're able to move the equipment. I also have good news for you in that some of the leaks in the roof that have been a trouble for our equipment are being repaired. And so very grateful to Sunbridge for the work that they are doing with that as well. Now, some of you might have missed a brand new show on Blue Mountain Television, Generosity. And if you didn't see it while it was airing on Blue Mountain Television, you haven't missed your opportunity to see this show, Generosity, produced by the Walla Walla University students. And this was in collaboration between the Center for Humanitarian Engagement and the Center for Media Ministry at Walla Walla University. This show about some of the great service activities going on in our community is available on demand at our website. So if you go to our website or our YouTube page, you can still see Generosity, the first episode. And I was just in a production meeting yesterday with the students and our producer here on campus and the director from the Center for Humanitarian Engagement talking about the next episode of Generosity, which we're now going into production on at Walla Walla University. So there'll be more coming up from that show as well. And then I wanted to let you know that we've hired a new intern at Blue Mountain Television. His name is Alex Murcia, and we are so happy to have him join us because his expertise is in editing, and he is helping Lowell with some of those post-production needs that we have here at Blue Mountain Television. So great to welcome him as an intern, and hope to interview him soon and help you get to know him just a bit better. I think those are the main things I wanted to share with you today on our station news segment. Please keep praying for our Wallula facility and the move of our equipment over there. And we've got all of our furniture and most of our people there, but we have a lot of equipment that still needs to be moved. That, of course, is expensive. So continue to ask for your gifts, your donations toward the Save Our Servers Fund, and also toward our general operating fund. And I want to thank you too for telling others about Blue Mountain Television, helping them get connected and watch the great programming here, and for your prayers. And until next time, I will see you later.